Now New York's governor is calling these apocalyptic images the new normal. Streets turned to rivers, all 7,400 miles of New York City's pipes inundated by torrential rain. Subways, cars and buses ground to a halt. Water poured through the walls of roofs of underground stops. Air travel paused as passengers waded through flooded terminals. These pictures are wild. Thousands of basements and ground level apartments, entire livelihoods destroyed in mere minutes by rising waters. And while the East Coast is having its rainiest fall season in 140 years, another alarming sign from above, courtesy of NASA's Aqua satellite. The color of the ocean is shifting from blue to green, signaling an abrupt change to the water's ecosystem. I want to bring in Dr. Michael Mann, a Presidential Distinguished Professor of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Pennsylvania and author of the new book, Our Fragile Moment: How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. Also back with me, David Lipsky, author of The Parrot in the Igloo, Climate and the Science of Denial. It is so great to have the two of you here together. David, you live in New York. It was a deluge. The governor declared a state of emergency. Parents got frantic calls to come and get your kids out of school. We can't have them here. But what do you say about a state of emergency, whether it's here or Texas or the Plains or Hawaii, that we were warned about decades ago?
It's like the entire country has been tested its ability to make decisions. We were warned in 1979 by the National Academy of Sciences, if this continues, there is no reason to doubt that climate change will occur and no reason to believe that those changes will be negligible. Here we are. Roger Revelle, first generation of the great tradition to which Professor Mann belongs, he warned in 1956 in Time magazine that within about 50 years, carbon dioxide could have a violent effect on the climate. Here we are.
Yeah, that was even before I was born, Michael Mann. Your new book is called Our Fragile Moment. How fragile are we, especially when it comes to aging infrastructure and overall, frankly, infrastructure that's not built to sustain the rain, the winds, the snow, the heat that we're now experiencing?
Yeah, we built this massive global infrastructure over thousands of years during a relatively stable climate. And there are 8 billion plus people now who depend on that infrastructure. And it is threatened by the fact that we are now changing the climate. That's what makes this moment so fragile. We're warming the planet at rates that have no precedent as far back as we look. And what that means is that we are losing the reliability of the infrastructure that helps sustain this very large population, helps provide resilience in the face of extreme weather events. Those events are getting more extreme, and they're starting to pass thresholds, as we see with New York City, where they're no longer just a nuisance. They become catastrophic in their consequences. If we continue to burn fossil fuels and go down this road, it's actually worse than a new normal. There was a mention of new normal earlier in the segment. It's an ever-moving baseline of greater warmth and more extreme weather events if we continue to burn fossil fuels. The good news here, the science tells us that if we stop burning fossil fuels and stop putting carbon pollution into the atmosphere, the surface of the planet stops warming up almost immediately. So there's a direct and immediate consequence of our efforts to act.
So I want to ask you both about who could lead this charge, because you're both professors. And so I want to ask you, and I'll start with you, Michael, about young people. They are turning high anxiety over climate change, and we know that they have it, into action. First, there was a successful lawsuit in Montana that argued the state's failure to combat climate change was unconstitutional. Now in Portugal, 6 young activists are in court. They're fighting 32 countries over climate change, arguing that it threatens their basic human rights. What are they fighting for, Michael? What might the world look like when they're our age if they're not successful?
Yeah, so, and it comes back to the theme here of the book, urgency versus agency. We see the urgency, but urgency without agency, without any way of changing things, can be debilitating. And the fortunate thing here is that we see with these young folks that we do have the ability to change things. The youth climate movement has had a massive impact. It has changed the entire conversation. We see these court cases that are going to now require that governments take climate change more seriously when they make decisions, for example, about granting new fossil fuel infrastructure. We're making some progress. We've seen global carbon emissions stabilize. They're no longer rising. So we're making progress, but we're not yet making enough progress. And that's why we have to take advantage of this moment, this fragile moment where there's still time to act, take advantage of the door that these young people have opened for us. But now we have to collectively walk through that door. We have to make the decisions. We have to vote. We have to do all the things that these young folks can't yet do so that we don't leave a degraded planet behind for them and their children and grandchildren.